It sails the Pacific, carrying cargo no one checks, on routes that don't exist on modern maps. Every crew member has a 1,000-yard stare and follows the same 6 bizarre rules without question. Last night, I broke just one and I saw something crawl out of the sea. Its eyes human, its teeth not. If you're reading this, I'm already too far gone. The sea is a strange mistress. They say she calls to certain kinds of people, wanderers, the broken, the damned. I never considered myself one of them until I stepped foot on the MV Kasaka, a rust-streaked freighter docked at a shadowy slip in Astoria, Oregon. The ad had been simple. Deckhand wanted. For week voyage. High pay. Cash. No names. No company. Listed. Just coordinates that I had nothing to lose. My rent was overdue, my phone was out of service, and I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. When I arrived at the dock, a thick fog hung in the air, curling around the ship like the fingers of something waiting, hungry. I told myself it was just a storm front, but the air smelled like brine and decay, like rotting teeth beneath a priest's. Smile. She was a beast of steel and salt. Massive, maybe 400 feet long, with hull plating pitted by barnacles and time. The name Kasaka was scrawled in faded Cyrillic across the bow, along with a crude painting of an orca leaping from black waves. I walked up the gangway. I noticed something odd. No crew greeted me. No bustling activity. Just a man standing at the top of the ramp, holding a clipboard and wearing a rain slicker too clean for the setting. His eyes were pale gray, almost silvery, and never blinked. "You're Jacob Myers?" he asked. Voice flat, accent hard to place. "Yeah," I replied, hesitating. He handed me a folded slip of laminated paper. "Read. Memorize. Burn it in your head." I opened it. There were only 6 sentences, typed, spaced evenly, with each word bolded. Recite the 6 rules to survive the sea. Never speak the sea's name aloud after sunset. If the fog rolls in at noon, go below deck and do not look outside until it lifts. If you hear knocking from inside a sealed container, do not open it. Ever. Every night, leave a slice of raw meat on the starboard rail at exactly 2:17 a.m. If someone calls your name from the ocean, they're not who you think they are. On the 7th night, the captain will ask you to do something unthinkable. Say yes. I stared at the list. "What is this?" I asked. The man just smiled. It didn't touch his eyes. Survival. Then he turned and walked away into the dark corridors of the ship, leaving me alone on deck with nothing but creaking metal and the sound of waves slapping against the hull. Anchored the crew. I met the crew at dinner. The mess hall was dimly lit with flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying flies. There were 6 of us. No one introduced themselves. No one smiled. The only sound was the metallic scrape of forks against dented trays. At the head of the table sat the captain. A massive man, maybe 6.5 feet tall, with skin like driftwood and a thick beard peppered with gray. His eyes were yellowed and distant, like he'd stared into the abyss one too many times and something had stared back. He raised his cup. "To safe voyages," he rasped. The crew muttered their agreement and took a sip. I followed suit, the liquid burning like fire. Down my throat. Rum? Maybe. It tasted older, darker, fermented somewhere the sun doesn't reach. Afterward, I was shown to my bunk by a gaunt crewman named Pavel who never once made eye contact. The quarters were tight. Bare mattress. Single porthole. The lock on. The inside was new. As if they'd replaced it recently. As if it mattered. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the ship creaked and moaned around me like it was alive. At 2:17 a.m. exactly, I heard the soft pad of footsteps outside my door, then the slow metallic clank of someone placing something on the outer rail. The offering. Fog. The fog comes at noon the 3rd day at sea. It happened. The sun was high when it rolled in. An unnatural fog, thicker than anything I'd seen before, like milk poured over the world. Within minutes, visibility dropped to 0. I remembered rule number 2. Heart pounding. I sprinted below deck and locked myself inside my cabin. I heard something outside. Not footsteps, not voices, but dragging. Wet dragging. And a chittering noise, like insects grinding against each other. I stayed frozen for hours, sweating bullets, hand gripping the rusted wrench I'd found earlier. I dared one glance out the porthole. There was something against the glass. A hand. Pale. Webbed. With too many fingers. It stayed there for a full minute, twitching. Then it vanished. When the fog lifted around 5 p.m., I crept out. The deck was wet with brine, and there were footprints, bare, huge, webbed, leading toward one of the sealed cargo containers. Packaged and knocking that night, while scrubbing the lower hold as instructed, I heard it. Knock. 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 It was coming from container B. 13.3 rhythmic knocks. Then a pause. Then another 3. They continued for a full 5 minutes. I knew rule number 3. Do not open it. But I wanted to run. Wanted to scream. Something inside that steel coffin was alive. Or at least aware. I could feel it. I backed away slowly, wrenched tight in my hands. Then I heard it again. This time my name. Jacob, a woman's voice. Familiar. My mother's voice. Help me, it's dark in here. My mother's been dead for 3 years. I bolted. Meat on bone the offering at 2:15 a.m. I stood on deck holding the raw meat I'd taken from the galley freezer. The stars above were swallowed by clouds. The sea was calm, too calm. I placed the bloody meat on the starboard rail. Just like the rule said, as I turned to leave, I heard something rise from the water. I didn't look, but I heard it breathing, wheezing, wet, hungry. Then I heard the meat being taken, followed by a low, satisfied purr. Almost feline, almost human. Merperson voices from the deep. On the 5th night, Pavel didn't come to dinner, and no one spoke of it. No one acknowledged the empty chair. But that night, I heard him, from the ocean. Jacob, it's Pavel. They left me. His voice came from the starboard side, soft and panicked. I stayed in my bunk, fists clenched, eyes shut. Then came the screaming. Not Pavel's, something else's, like a whale being skinned alive. Like a choir of drowned children. I sobbed into my pillow until morning. Coffin. The 7th night. Tonight is the 7th night. The captain knocked on my door at midnight. His eyes were colder than ever. It's time, he said. He handed me a knife. A curved, bone-handled blade crusted with salt. You know the rules. I don't know what he'll ask me to do, but I'll say yes that I have to. Because the sea doesn't forgive, and the Kasaka never returns with the same crew it left port with. The captain's eyes were like wet stone, ancient, unreadable, and impossibly heavy. He stood in the doorway to my bunk, the low hum of the ship vibrating through the steel floor beneath our feet. The hallway behind him flickered with failing fluorescent lights. Somewhere deep in the ship, metal groaned like something large and restless was shifting in its sleep. He extended the bone-handled blade again. Wordless now, waiting. I swallowed. Rule number 6. On the 7th night, the captain will ask you to do something unthinkable. Say yes. What do I have to do? I asked. My voice cracked. His reply was simple. Follow me. Skull and crossbones down below. We descended deeper into the bowels of the Kasaka, lower than I'd gone before. Past the cargo holds, past the auxiliary storage, into a subcompartment labeled in rusted Cyrillic letters I couldn't read. The air grew colder, thicker. Breathing felt like sucking water through cotton. My flashlight beam barely cut through the gloom. The walls were covered in condensation and strange markings, not graffiti, but carvings. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them. Symbols I couldn't place. Spirals, eyes, teeth. Something that looked like a fish, but wrong. Human teeth where gills should be. I stopped. Where are we going? The captain didn't answer. He just kept walking. Finally, we reached a steel bulkhead. Padlocked. He unlocked it with a long, black iron key that didn't fit the rest of the ship's modern locks. The door groaned open. Inside was Pavel. Person standing. Pavel's fate. He sat slumped against the wall, wrists and ankles shackled in place with ropes made of something like kelp, but stiffer, alive somehow. His skin was pale and bloated, like he'd been underwater too long. But his eyes opened, and they were full of pain. I stepped back. What the hell is this? The captain spoke then, slowly. He answered the voice. Rule number 5. He disobeyed. But he's alive. For now. He handed me the knife. Now you choose. My hands trembled. This is the unthinkable, isn't it? I asked. The captain didn't nod. He didn't need to. Pavel looked at me then. Really looked at me. Tears welled in his eyes. Do it, he whispered. Before it comes for me. I still don't know what it was. But when I looked down, I saw his legs had started to change. The skin was peeling, revealing something scaled beneath it. Drop of blood. The knife's purpose. I did what was asked. It was over quickly. Pavel never screamed. He only smiled at the end, as if I'd freed him from a fate worse than death. The captain placed a hand on my shoulder. Good. You've passed. I vomited until Bal burned my throat. He handed me a flask. Drink. You'll need it. I did. It tasted like salt water and fire. Later, I returned to my bunk. I couldn't sleep. Not after that. I stared at the ceiling, then at the porthole. Outside, something moved in the water. A silhouette, humanoid, watching. Anchor the black book thing. Next day, I found a journal hidden behind a loose panel in the mess hall. It wasn't old. It was ancient, leather-bound in something coarse. Pages yellowed, written in a shaky, looping scrawl that varied from calm to manic, like the writer had been slipping into madness. It belonged to a former crewman. Name redacted. Dates missing. But the entries, dear God. Entry number 45. They feed the sea to keep it calm. The offerings are not always meat. Sometimes they're memories. Sometimes worse. I forgot my daughter's name yesterday. The sea took it. Entry number 61. One of the crates moved on its own. I heard breathing inside. I looked anyway. I wish I hadn't. My face will never heal. Entry number 79. The captain is not the same man anymore. He's grown barnacles along his back. They pulse at night. I slammed the book shut. My breath hitched. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps outside the mess hall, and dragging. I ran. Package B-13 opens that night. There was an emergency alarm. The ship swayed harder than ever before. More than. Storm conditions. I ran to the deck. Rain. Darkness. Lightning carving up the sky. Crew scrambled, screaming in Russian. I couldn't understand everything, but one word kept repeating. Akrit. Akrit. It's open. Container B-13 had been breached. The locks were bent outward, like something had forced its way out, and the inside was smeared with a thick, black mucus that steamed on contact with the rain. The captain barked an order. Seal off hold 3. Burn it if you must. But it was already too late. We were no longer alone on the ship. Spiral shell the thing from the water. It came out during the storm. Not all at once, but piece by piece. First, a hand. Long, sinewy, fingers like eels. Then a face, but wrong. As if someone had sculpted a human from fish and madness. It wore Pavel's voice like a mask. Jacob. It smiled, teeth too long, eyes too wet. It dripped memory. I screamed. The crew opened fire. Old harpoons, flare guns, shotguns with salt rounds. The thing recoiled. It didn't bleed. It shed, like a snake, leaving part of itself behind as it slithered up the main deck. We sealed the hatches and prayed. Chains. What is the Kasaka? In the hours that followed, I cornered one of the older crewmen, Nikolai. His left arm ended in a stump. His eyes were yellowed, like the captain's. Tell me the truth. What is this ship? He laughed. Kasaka is not a ship. It's a vessel. Same thing. No, he leaned close. She is not made to carry cargo. She carries balance. Between ocean and man. Between nightmare and waking. Every voyage, she loses more of herself. I didn't understand, but I would, soon. Radio. The voice over the radio later that night. The radio turned on by itself. Old static hissed. Then, my voice. Recorded. Distorted. Help me. Help me. I'm still in the water. I yanked the power cord. Still, it crackled. My voice kept begging. Don't let them take me, Jacob. You let me drown. I never told anyone this before. I once pushed my brother into the ocean when we were kids. He couldn't swim. He never came back up. And now the sea remembers. New moon. What's next? Tomorrow, the captain says we reach the threshold. He won't say what that means, but the crew is preparing. They're painting symbols along the hull, smearing blood across doors, whispering prayers to old gods with no names. One of the crew tried to jump overboard. He didn't make it far. The sea pulled him down. Upward. It rose like a hand and snatched him from midair. He screamed all the way into the clouds. Direct hit. Final thoughts. For now, this is not a freighter. This is a sacrifice, and I'm part of it now. I've followed the rules so far, but I fear the final rule isn't the end. It's just the beginning of something deeper, darker. The sea doesn't just take you. It changes you, and I can feel it now, inside me. The salt, the voice, the pull. The captain said we'll see her soon. I asked who. He only smiled. The one below. There's no sun anymore. I don't mean that figuratively. The sun vanished, sometime between 4 a.m. and dawn, when I should have seen the faint orange hue across the horizon. There was only ink. Not just a cloudy sky, but a vast black dome. Overhead, stars. Gone. Moon. Gone. Even the water beneath the casaka changed. It stopped reflecting light. That it stopped moving. That we had crossed something. The threshold, the captain said. The crew fell silent after that. Even the usually murmuring sea fell deathly still. That's when I realized the waves weren't natural. The sea had been pretending to move, to mimic normalcy. And now that it no longer needed to perform, it dropped the act. We'd entered the dead Pacific. Candle ritual preparations. The captain gathered us on the main deck just after dawn, if you could still call it that. A lantern burned in the middle, casting sickly yellow light across our weary, pale faces. He carried the black ledger this time, a thick book bound in oilskin, with seaweed still clinging to the edges. He opened it with reverence and read aloud in a language I'd never heard, his voice guttural. At times, inhuman, we repeated his chants, or tried to. The words were wrong in our mouths, like speaking glass. Several crewmen began bleeding from their noses. One collapsed. No one helped him. This is the ceremony of the maw, the captain declared, voice echoing unnaturally. She wakes soon. Who is she? I whispered to Nikolai. He didn't answer. He just pointed toward the water. Water wave. The water listens. The sea rippled, not from wind, not from current, but like it had breathed, and from its surface. Eyes opened, hundreds of them, blinking, watching us from beneath the glass-like skin of the ocean. Not fish, not sea creatures, not hallucinations. They were human eyes. A child's, an old man's, a woman's with mascara still clinging to the lashes. They stared in unison, unblinking now. The captain bowed. The crew dropped to their knees. I stood there, paralyzed. Then the eyes vanished all at once, and the sea spoke, not in sound, but in thought. A pressure in my skull, an oily whisper threading through my mind like sea worms in a corpse. One among you still doubts. I gasped at so did the others, because they heard it too. The captain turned toward me. You must prove yourself again. Fire the second task. They led me back below deck, back to the maintenance corridor beneath the cargo bay, where the lights didn't work anymore, and the shadows moved when you weren't looking directly at them. They gave me a torch this time. No electricity worked here. Not anymore. The air smelled like burnt salt and rot. I was instructed to go alone and to hold 9. That something had gotten loose. They didn't say what, just that I needed to return with one of its teeth. I asked what happened to the last man who tried to N01 answered. Bowen hold 9. The door to hold 9 was sealed by 3 thick chains. I removed them slowly, the clang echoing. Down the dead corridor, inside was absolute darkness. Not just lack of light, but presence of dark. A choking, thick entity. The second I stepped in, the door slammed behind me. Torch shaking in my hand, I moved forward, heart hammering in my ears. Crates lay overturned. Deep gouges clawed across the walls. Something had burrowed through the steel. Then I heard it, breathing wet, labored, followed by laughter low, deep, almost human. The flame flickered violently. Then I saw it, an emaciated thing, gray, slithering on elongated limbs. Its face was stretched like wet canvas pulled over a skull. No mouth, until it tore one into its cheek and grinned. It lunged. Kitchen knife. The tooth I barely escaped. The blade from Chapter 2, the bone-handled one, had remained strapped to my belt ever since. In a desperate move, I swung it into the thing's head as it grabbed me. It didn't die, but it screamed, not in pain but offense, like I'd broken a sacred agreement. Its blood was cold. It smelled like old pennies and rotting wood. I hacked once more, this time at its jaw, and tore loose one of its fangs. The thing shrieked and collapsed into the shadows, writhing back into the cracks in the floor. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the captain. I threw the fong at his feet. He smiled. You may yet survive. Packaged the cargo manifest that night. I snuck into the captain's quarters. I had to know. There was a hidden drawer beneath his bunk. Inside, a torn cargo manifest. But it wasn't goods. It was names, human names, dates, weights. Some marked accepted, others marked rejected. And beside each name, a destination. None were ports. None were even coordinates. They were locations in the deep. Things like below the abyssal gate, The maw of the trench, her cradle echo. Chamber 3-inch, I realized then. We weren't delivering anything, we were feeding the ocean, and the ocean kept score. Tornado, the cyclone of eyes the next day, the storm hit. But this wasn't weather. The clouds above swirled in a spiral, forming an eye, a literal eye. Bloodshot, twitching, and the waves began to rise. We were now sailing vertically, the ship climbing a wall of water like an elevator. The captain didn't panic. He ordered the engines to full throttle, upward. That's when we saw them. All the things we'd fed, they were swimming in the sky, twisting, floating bodies. Crew from past voyages. People half dissolved, smiling wide, whispering prayers in. Reverse point, one of them locked eyes with me. It was Pavel. He mouthed one word: run. And arrow, the eye of the storm at the very top of the storm. When we crested the final wave, we reached a plateau of black sea. Flat, infinite. The sky above was clear. The stars were wrong, as if we were beneath them now, not under their gaze, but their prison. I in the center of the sea, something rose. A tower of flesh. No, it looked like coral, barnacled and dripping. Eyes blinked open across its surface. Mouths gaped, chewing water. A throne, built from the bones of ships and sailors. She emerged, and she was not human, not even close. Mermaid, the one below. She looked like beauty if it were corrupted, an amalgamation of every drowning dream and oceanic fear man ever imagined. Long limbs, a crown of twisted coral, a voice that sounded like waves crashing in an empty church. He brought you to me, she whispered in 1,000 languages at once. Do you accept the gift? The captain kneeled, and I almost did, but then I saw my reflection in the watered my eyes. Had changed, they were silver now, like hers. I had followed every rule, I had passed every test, but now I understood. The final rule wasn't say yes. It was don't forget who you are. So I stood, and I said no. Collision, the collapse, she screamed. The water shattered like glass. The tower crumbled. The ship buckled beneath us, thrown like a toy into a cosmic whirlpool. Crew flew into the sky, screaming, twisting, laughing. The captain tried to hold on, but she took him. I fell, and fell, and fell. I woke up on a beach, somewhere in the South Pacific. Sun overhead. No wreckage, no ship, no proof. Only a deep scar on my chest in the shape of a spiral, and a note tucked into my jacket, burned into it in salt-charred ink. You passed. For now, the sea will call again. I should have died. No one survives what I did. No one returns from her waters. No one escapes the threshold after saying no, but I did, and that's the problem. Desert island, the beach of forgotten men. When I awoke on that desolate beach, I thought it was over. Waves whispered gently. Birds circled lazily overhead. The tide receded without dragging me back. For a moment, I even believed I had been spared, saved, released. But the illusion cracked the moment I looked down at my chest, carved into. My skin, raw and fresh, was a perfect spiral, still weeping salt water, still burning in the sunlight. The moment I tried to stand, I felt something inside me shift. Not pain, not sickness. It was pulled out a phantom tide within my bones. I wasn't alone. Hibiscus Island of the Mark, the island was uncharted. I know this because I wasn't the first to wash up here. Over the following days, I met the others, 8 of them, men and women, all with the same salt-burnt spiral carved into their chests. All of them former sailors, fishermen, even deep-sea divers, survivors of her threshold, survivors of the Kasaka and other ships like it. Each of them had a story. Each of them had rules they'd followed. Different rules, different ships, but the same result. They were marked for return. One of them said. His name was Ezra, a New Zealander, 50-ish, gray in the beard and eyes. We're not survivors, mate, he said. We're vessels, empty skins walking dry land. The sea's already inside us. It's just waiting. I laughed. I called him insane. Then that night, I dreamt of her again, the one below, smiling. Compass the island's secret. The island was more than a castaway's graveyard. It was a watchpoint at dawn. The 4th day, I discovered something strange while foraging for coconuts inland. A series of stone monoliths, weathered by time, but unmistakably arranged in a circled the center, a shallow pit. Inside it, hundreds of barnacles, clinging to nothing, floating in the air, chattering in silence. And there was a notebook, encased in wax, preserved by time. The writing inside was English, but older. World War II era, maybe earlier. Captain H.M. Rowe, 1942, we were dispatched to study unexplained disappearances along the Pacific trade routes. What we found was no storm, no submarine, not even the enemy. We found the threshold. The sea has a memory. She offers eternity, but it is not mercy. It is absorption. Some of us escaped, but none of us left unchanged. She comes in spirals. She comes when the moon blinks. She always comes back for what is hers. That night, the moon blinked, it vanished from the sky for precisely 3 seconds. And when it returned, every spiral on our chests pulsed, glowing with faint bioluminescence. The tide receded, farther than it ever should, and it did not return door. The door beneath the sand. We gathered at the shore the next morning and found the beach transformed. The sea had pulled back miles, exposing a floor of stone and barnacle-covered bone. And at its center, a door. Not metal, not wood, but made of flesh-like coral and teeth. Human teeth, shark teeth, unrecognizable teeth, and it was breathing. The others said nothing. Ezra just nodded. It's time. No, I said. We escaped. We survived. He looked at me, sorrow in his voice. You still don't get it, do you? He pulled open his shirt. His spiral wasn't carved, that it was growing. Pulsing under his skin like an embryo. She doesn't let you go. She only gives you time. And now, she's opened the door. Cyclone, the descent, we argued. Fought. Some wanted to resist. Run. Hide. But the door called louder than logic. And when night fell, Ezra walked into it one by one. The others followed. I held out. I tried to resist. Screamed at the sky. Slammed rocks. Against the spiral on my chest. Didn't matter. That night, I awoke, standing before the door. My feet bleeding. My hands shaking. And the spiral glowing brighter than ever. The door opened for me, and I walked in. Milky Way beneath the ocean. That isn't. Inside wasn't water. It was a vast hallway, spiral-shaped, breathing, lit by veins of glowing blue mucus. I walked downward, always downward. With each step, memories peeled away. First my parents' faces, then my brother's voice, then my own name. I knew what this place was now. This was the true Kasaka. The ship was only a baited hook. This was the line, the real, the final pull into her mouth, and I was almost at the bottom. Speech ballooned the conversation. She waited for me at the end. Not a goddess, not a monster, not a mermaid. She was familiar. She looked like my mother, my brother, myself. She smiled, kind and cruel. You said no before, she whispered. But saying no doesn't stop the tide. I dropped to my knees. Why me? She tilted her head. Because you heard the call. You followed it. You remembered the rules. And still you looked behind the veil. I wept. Am I going to die? She laughed. No, you're going to become. The mirror. See, she stepped aside. Behind her, a black ocean, suspended in air, spinning in a perfect spiral. Floating above it, a reflection of me. But not me. Older. Sharper. More marine. He looked at me with pity and hunger. And then, without sound, he took my place. I fell backward into the mirror sea. Water wave returned to shore. I woke up 2 weeks later. On another beach. In the real world, Coast Guard found me. Clothed. Confused. No spiral on my chest. But they said my eyes had turned silver. I looked in the mirror. I looked human. But I felt like a shoreline. I felt tidal. The sea wasn't calling me anymore. Because she already had me. Receipt epilogue. One last rule. I now live far inland. I've boarded up my windows. I keep no water in my home. Not even a toilet. Not even tears. I write this for you. If you ever get offered a job on a ship without a name, if the rules are simple and the money's too good, if the ocean whispers your name in a voice you almost recognize, follow all the rules. Memorize them. Obey them. Burn them into your soul. But remember, there is always a seventh rule. It is never written, and it always demands the greatest cost. I moved inland to no oceans, no rivers, not even a goddamn rain puddle within 100 miles. I chose a dying town in New Mexico, drier than bone, forgotten by time, suffocating in dust. There's a part of the desert here they call God's ashtray. It hasn't rained in over 2 decades. I figured if anywhere was safe, it was here, but I was wrong. because I didn't understand the final truth back then. The ocean doesn't live on Earth, it is Earth, whole. The first sign it started with a dream. I was back on the Kasaka. Except this time, the crew had no faces. Only barnacle-covered voids, grinning wide, dripping seawater onto the rusted deck. The captain stood at the helm with a twisted compass in his hand, its needle pointing straight into my chest. I woke up soaked. Not sweat, salt water. There were wet footprints around my bed. I live alone. Packaged the package 3 days later, a package. Arrived at my P.O. box, in a return address. No markings. Inside, a jar. Mason style. Filled with water darker than ink and colder than ice. And inside it, a tooth. The same kind I pulled from that thing in hold 9. Wrapped around the tooth was a slip of yellow paper. On it, written in perfect block print. You said no. She still chose you. I didn't sleep after that. Every drain in my house started bubbling. The toilet flushed by itself. The pipes groaned at night, like whales calling to their calves. I smashed every fixture. I showered with bottled water. I drank only dry powder mixes. It wasn't enough. Cloud with rain. It rained in God's ashtray one morning. I woke to thunder. Unreal. Impossible that it hadn't rained here in 23 years. I looked out the window and saw it. A single cloud above my house. Not moving. Not spreading. Just hovering. Rain poured straight down like a divine spotlight. Only on my roof. The water in my sink had turned black. The walls began to sweat. The spiral on my chest, thought long gone, was glowing through my skin, faintly pulsing like a heartbeat. Something had returned. Not just her, the Kasaka. Merperson, the visitor that night, I heard knocking at the front door. Not the gentle kind. Not even angry fists. A rhythmic, wet knocking. I didn't answer. Then I heard it again, from my bedroom closet. Then from beneath the floorboards. Then, finally, from inside the mirror. I covered every reflective surface. Too late, when I passed. My hallway mirror, my reflection didn't follow. It smiled instead. Silver eyes, barnacled teeth. My voice whispered back. Time to go home. The spiral room, I blacked out after that. When I woke up, I was no longer in my house. I was in a small room. Round, windowless, lined with rusted steel. Water leaked from the walls, and chains hung from the ceiling. A single light bulb swayed gently overhead. I recognized it immediately. The Kasaka's brig. I screamed. I clawed at the walls, pounded the door, cried until blood filled my throat. Then the door opened. She stood there, not the sea goddess, not the faceless crew. Me, another me, taller, wetter, staring with that same hollow calm I'd seen in Pavled. He held the bone-handled knife. You passed the test, he whispered. Now you administer it. He left the blade and walked away. The door sealed shut again, and I wept. Shipped the reawakening. I don't know how long I stayed in that room. Hours, days, maybe weeks. There was no time here, just tides of silence. Dreams of drowning. Then I was released, thrown onto the deck like dead cargo. The ship was no longer a ship. It had grown, expanded, its hull now extended for miles, bigger than cities, dripping seawater into stars. It didn't float in the Pacific anymore. It floated in the ocean beneath existence. And the crew, they were no longer men. They used to be. Now they were fisher priests, harvesting human essence from reality like bait. The Kasaka didn't carry goods. It carried gateways. And now, it carried me. Radio the broadcast. There's a radio on the ship. Cracked. Buzzing. Ancient. Every few hours, it plays a message. Always the same. My voice. From the night I screamed for help during my first voyage. This is Jacob Myers, deckhand. If you hear this, don't get on the Kasaka. It isn't a freighter. It's a feeder. And there are 6 rules to survive. But they only exist to test if you're ripe. Compass the final revelation they told me, eventually. The captain, or what he became, explained it. Earth isn't a planet. Not truly. It's a pin. A breeding ground. And the seas are the membrane between here and what lies below. Humans are hosts. Vessels, meant to mature, harden, learn. Some grow strong enough to glimpse truth. Those are the ones she takes. To serve. To seed. The spiral isn't a curse, it's a birthmark. And now, I'm pregnant with the tide. Cyclone the sea will spread. I am writing this from a cargo crate. This message is coded into the lining of a container labeled KTSK 314, dry goods. And it will arrive in a port near you. And when it opens, when the spiral grows warm, when the meat offering rots before sunrise, you'll know the Kasaka has returned, and maybe you'll be next. Drop of blood final W if you see the sea where it shouldn't be, a puddle in the desert, a dripping pipe in a sealed bunker, salt crystals in your eyes when you wake up. She has noticed you, and if you hear the rules, obey them. But just know this, Rule 7 is always different. It always knows your darkest truth. And once she asks, you can't say no, because the sea does not forgive. It remembers.